What's going on, you guys? It is your boy, the American F1 fan, Eric Ringle here, and it is prediction time in Formula One. The 2025 season is nearly upon us, and it's now time for me to put out my predictions. I'm going to put out the driver standings for all 20 drivers, the constructor standings, and then I've got 3 bold predictions for the 2025 season. But first, let's run through the driver standings as I'm going to predict them. So starting off with the driver standings, I'm going to run through 11 through 20 relatively quickly, and we'll put a little bit more into it with the top 10. But my number 20 is Jack Doohan, and pay attention to the end of this video. I've got something on that. I got number 19, I've got Gabriel Bortoleto from Kick Sauber. Number 18, I've got Nico Hulkenberg, also from Kick Sauber. Number 17, I've got Alexander Albon. Number 16, I've got Isaac Hadjar from VCARB. Then moving on to number 15, I've got Pierre Gasly. Number 14, I've got Lance Stroll, and I don't think that's very much of a leap as far as where he's going to finish. Now, my number 13, I've got Yuki Tsunoda. For no lack of, I mean, Yuki's a really great driver at VCARB. My number 12, I've got Carlos Sainz, and then my number 11, I've got Fernando Alonso. So, just looking through 11 through 20, like I said, if you pay attention to the end of the video and stay tuned, you'll see why I've got Jack Doohan at number 20. The Kick Sauber team is a team that, they had some forward momentum when it came to last season, but I think that team is just starting to focus on Audi for 2026 and really kind of putting all their eggs in that basket for 2026. And I have a feeling that this season is really going to have them suffer. And I think Nico's going to really, rue the day that he decided to move over to Kick Sauber instead of potentially staying at Haas. I think these standings are probably going to be the closest we've had in quite some time. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that, a lot of these names that I bring up end up in the top half of the standings. But I got Alex at 17. I just think Williams always starts off extremely slow. And Alex just seems to always have that hard time of trying to pick up what exactly, is going on with the car, what it's, what, is going to be its strong suit, what's going to be its weakness. And Alex always seems to have a hard time early on in the season getting his head wrapped around that, whereas your teammate Carlos Sainz, he's usually able to pick that stuff up relatively quickly and adapt himself to driving the car. Like I said, Pierre Gasly at number 15. I just think Alpine, granted they had a really good finish to last season, Jack Doohan being at the team and with all the turmoil that's going on in Alpine, I think that's going to play a major part in how this team, it responds after having, being able to finish 6th in the constructor standings last year. I think there's going to be a lot more pressure on that team to do even better. And, yes, Pierre will do well, but I just think as a team, they're not going to be as good as they were. And Aston Martin has always been a team. They started off really well a couple seasons ago, had some podium finishes with Fernando Alonso, but we've seen over the last few years that car has just been taking step after step after step backwards. And I think it's going to take another step backwards, at least until Adrian Newey gets involved with the 2026 car. That's why I've got Fernando Alonso at 11 and Lance Stroll at 14. And like I said, Yuki Tsunoda, I love him to death, and I really wish they would have allowed him to move up to Red Bull. But I just think with VCARB, they're another team that has such a hard time, being able to bring developments to the car that's going to, move that car up the grid. And I have a feeling that, VCARB is going to have another one of those tough seasons. To my top 10, and my number 10, I've got Kimi Antonelli. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to be a horrible. I think 10th place is really good for a rookie. I just think with Kimi, he's going to have to try to wrap his head around a car that has drastically changed. And even everybody at Mercedes has said that they've made some pretty drastic changes going into this season. And I'm not saying that it's going to be too big for him to handle. I just think it's going to take him a lot longer than some other people to wrap their head around how that car is going to race, how it's going to react in qualifying. So that's why I've got Kimi Antonelli at 10. Then moving on to my number 9, I've got Esteban Ocon from Haas. Now, we saw towards the end of last season, Haas was really making strides. They're bringing upgrades on almost a race by race basis, whereas compared to before, they were always bringing one massive upgrade in the middle of the season and then tried to wrap their heads around that. Whereas now they're bringing, upgrades almost every single race weekend and able to really kind of hone in their car. And Esteban's a guy, yes, he may not be the greatest teammate in the world, but I really do think that Esteban is able to wrap his head around developments with the car, and I think him being at that young driver test at the end of last season, getting into the Haas for the first time, I think really helped him out to understand the car. And now with them also having a race simulator kind of at the Toyota headquarters with Gazoo Racing, I think that's going to help them out too, and being able to really kind of wrap their head around the developments that they're going to bring to start the 2025 season. And I think he's going to really start it off on the right foot, and that's why I've got him at number 9. At number 8, this may be a shock to some, but as this team has always progressed, they've always focused on just one driver and one driver only. And unfortunately, I've got Liam Lawson at number 8. And Red Bull is, it's Max Verstappen's team. They build that car around what Max Verstappen wants. And, unfortunately, I think that is to a detriment to every one of his teammates. We've seen it year after year with Alexander Albon. We've seen it with Daniel Ricciardo. We've seen it now with Sergio Perez. I think we're going to see the exact same thing where they build all these upgrades around what Max wants on the car, but I think it comes at a detriment to Liam Lawson, and I think it's going to show some of the weaknesses that may have kept Liam Lawson out of Formula One for so long up until now. My number 7 is one of the other rookies in this field, Ollie Bierman. Now, I know what everybody's going to say. Eric, you're a Haas homer. I see what you're doing here. You've got 2 Haas drivers in the top 10, but I think Oliver Bierman showed so much talent last season. And, I remember putting out a video last season in which I talked about Ollie Bierman and Kimi Antonelli stepping up to F1, and I thought it was a little too early. But, Ollie Bierman was able to step into the Ferrari when Carlos Sainz had to step out for a race because of the appendix surgery. And he showed just how good he can be, especially stepping into a car he had barely even touched before he got into qualifying. He had to learn on the fly. And now that he worked with Haas a lot of last season. He raced a couple times for them. I think he's got a leg up compared to Kimi Antonelli, whereas he knows kind of where the upgrades were last season with Haas. And going into 2025, he knows exactly what the team is looking to do going into this season with some more of those upgrades and adding to what they've already got on the car. So that's why I've got Oliver Bierman at number 7. At number 6, I've got George Russell. Now, this is no slight against George Russell. Like I said, I think, and this is going to go towards one of my bold predictions, so I'm going to kind of keep it close to the vest for right now, but I think George Russell being at 6 is just going to be one of those, Mercedes is going to be good this year. George has already got his head around what they're wanting to do with the W16 this year for Mercedes, and I think that's really going to help him out, and it's you're going to see a different George Russell. He is going to show a maturity level this year, now being the de facto team leader that Lewis Hamilton is gone. George is going to be able to, he's going to command the top strategies, the top setups. And George has always been really well known for his setups and, being able to set up a car better than Lewis Hamilton did last season, in which he out-qualified him just as much as Lewis Hamilton out-qualifying him. And I think that's going to mean that George Russell is going to have I think a really good season. And I know a lot of people are going to say 6 is not a really great season, but I think for George Russell and the way that I've got the rest of this grid, I think this is a really good season from George. My number 5, and I can guarantee you right now I'm going to piss off some Ferrari fans. Number 5, I've got Charles Leclerc. Yes, I've got Charles Leclerc at number 5. Now, again, this is no slight to Charles Leclerc or Ferrari. I think we've all talked about it. 2025 is the season where literally just about every team on the F1 grid is getting closer and closer and closer to each other. And I think it's just going to be a matter of, a DNF here or a DNF there, maybe a race victory where it wasn't expected. I think it's going to boil down to that. And, Charles is such a great driver, but I think there's going to come a point where we've seen Charles, maybe get in his head a little bit and make a mistake here and there. He's done it in Miami. He's done it at Baku. He's found ways at points to just make that mistake big enough that it really costs him and it costs his team. And, I wish he could get away from that as a driver, and I hope that this season, I hope I'm wrong with this 5th place selection, and I hope that he's able to, really take the next step forward, not making the mistakes that he's made in years past, and maybe not let his emotions get the best of him like they have in the past as well, like they did at Canada last season, where he didn't quit on the team, but he was done with that race car and how the strategy worked out in Canada. My number 4 is Oscar Piastri from McLaren. Again, this is another one of those. Oscar showed a big step last season. Obviously in his rookie season, he was, far behind what Lando Norris was able to do. Then last season, Oscar showed that he can win races and that he can be just as competitive as the top guys in Formula One. And I'm telling you right now, Oscar is a future world champion. I felt like that Oscar was always going to be, when he went to McLaren and, kind of left Alpine in the dust, I felt like that Oscar was going to kind of rue the decision he made there. But I mean, he's made a great decision moving over to McLaren, and I think it's just going to show, with the skill he's already got and the McLaren, that the way that they've built it and the way he's been able to wrap his head around all the upgrades and the way that that car drives, I think 4th is a very easy, great season for him, and I could be very wrong, and he could be in the top 3. So moving to my top 3, at number 3 is Max Verstappen. I do not think Max repeats as world champion again this year. I think, like I've said before, the 2025 grid is so close together this season that I think it's going to be a lot more difficult for Max to, reel off 7 or 8 victories in a row, even 5 or 6 victories in a row where he can, create that space between him and second place. I think it's going to be a fight from the very beginning between McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull, maybe even Mercedes. I think it's going to be a dogfight between those top 4 teams, and I think that the points are going to be so spread so thinly between all the teams that I think it's going to take, Max down a peg this year, and I just think Max is going to finish at number 3. But now my number 2, I've got Lewis Hamilton from Ferrari. Now, from everything that we've heard, Lewis loves this Ferrari, this SF26. I think he really likes it, and he's able to get his head around what the Ferrari team were wanting to do with this car and how they were wanting to build it. That Lewis is going to have kind of his say as far as what developments maybe in the pipeline next for the team. Obviously with 2 number 1s like Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, they're both going to have their say in where they want the upgrades to go. But Lewis Hamilton and Fred Vasseur are like 2 peas in a pod. Fred's always, really taken care of Lewis in the past. in the lower feeder series. And I think that's more of the same. And Lewis wanted to be at Ferrari and he wanted to be with Fred. And I think this is the rejuvenation that Lewis Hamilton's career needed to, again, fight for championships in Formula One and potentially fight for his 8th World Drivers' Championship, which means the 2025 world champion is Lando Norris at McLaren. Now, like I said, I think this season is going to be so close and, it's going to be a fight to the very end, especially with these three guys. Lando Norris, I think, hearing in interviews with him in the offseason have really proved to me that I think he's going to have a different mindset going into 2025 than he did last year. I think Lando still last year was the happy-go-lucky Lando that, when he gets a race victory, great. If he doesn't, he was still just like that happy-go-lucky guy. And I think going into 2025, we're going to see a much different Lando Norris where he's more mentally prepared for, the things that, the top champions of our sport have always, pushed other drivers to. And, we saw it last year with Max Verstappen and, kind of the getting the elbows way far out. I think Lando's going to be ready for those types of moves this season. And I think Lando is going to win the 2025 Formula One Championship. So now moving on to the constructor standings, I think this is going to be a tale of two halves, basically. So I'll give you the first half, which is my teams 6 through 10. So my number 10 is Kick Sauber. Like I said, I feel like Kick Sauber is just, going to just crawl by this season because they're more focused on the 2026 season with the new regulations coming out, with the engine supplier of Audi coming in. I think that they're going to be so focused on that 2025 is going to be a write-off for them this season. And I just don't think we're going to see the results that we want to. And it's nothing against Gabriel or Nico. I just think that, that Mattia Binotto and everybody at the leadership of Audi is really just waiting for these new regulations to come in. Then my number 9 is Alpine. Like I said, I think they had a really good last season. I think what helped them the most was that shock double podium that they got with Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly. And I don't see that from Alpine this year. They obviously already run into deficit with the fact that their engine is running so much lower than compared to everybody else. And, they're not making the engine switch to Mercedes till, next season. I think Alpine is going to struggle mightily when it comes to trying to get that engine around a upgraded package of aerodynamics on that car, and I just don't see much from Alpine this year, and I don't see the shock double podium like they got last season that's going to help propel them up to the top 5. My number 8 is Williams. I think Williams is a team that, again, I think they're more waiting for 2026 where James Vowles it will have, his full hand around how that car is built, how that car gets upgraded, how the engine is going to respond with the upgrades or with the way the chassis is when it comes to the 2026 regulations. I'm not saying that they're totally writing the season off. We did see some improvement towards the end of the season with Williams, but I don't think it's going to be enough to be able to propel them up, even to a top 5 finish. And so that's why I've got them at number 8. Then I've got VCarb at number 7. I just think that's where VCarb is as a team, especially with the pairing that they've got with Yuki Tsunoda and Isaac Hadjar. I think Yuki's a great driver. Isaac is just such an unknown, and yes, he was up for the Red Bull seat at one point, but we just don't know what to expect. Yes, Isaac was great in F2, but now moving over to F1 in a car that we've in a top league like F1, we've seen him in practice sessions, and it's not like he's been setting the world afire and really showing that he could be one of the sport's next top stars. I think Isaac is just another, pretty decent driver, and I think he's only going to be able to get VCARB up to that number 7 spot. And then my number 6 is Aston Martin. And I know that's dropping them again and almost another 2 spots this season, but we've just seen it time after time that Aston Martin always takes their car in the wrong direction when it comes to upgrading the vehicle. Aston Martin can't depend on a Lance Stroll to, bring them back up to the grid. They're putting all their eggs in one basket with Fernando Alonso and expecting him to be able to, drag this team to the heights of, top 3 teams. And it's not possible with a team that just sometimes has no directions with where their upgrades are going. And with Adrian Newey coming in 2026 to really have his hand on, the design of the car, I see Aston Martin taking another huge step back this season. Now, like I said, this was a tale of 2 different grids here. So my top 5, number 5, I've got MoneyGram Haas F1, and like I said, I think Ayo Komatsu has really got this team, really running on all cylinders. And it's no slight against Gunther. It's just Ayo has done something different with this team that has literally led them in a totally different direction than we've seen them in years past. And I, for one, as a Haas Formula One fan, I'm excited for what's going to come this year. You've got such a great rookie in Oliver Bierman. You've got Esteban Ocon, who at times has shown just the kind of driver he can be in F1. He can be a race winner. He's done it in Alpine before. The only question mark, I think, for this team, and everybody wants to bring it up, is how well of a teammate is Esteban Ocon going to be with Oliver Bierman? Is he going to be that teammate that they literally clash every chance they get? Or is he going to be the teammate that's going to teach Oliver Bierman, what is needed to become a Formula One race winner in Formula One? And I think it's going to be the latter. I think, with Esteban and Pierre Gasly being put together, it was doomed from the get-go at Alpine. And I think now that he's away from there and has got a teammate like Oliver Bierman, who's young, who's hungry for, F1 stardom, and he's at a team that, is rising up in the standings, I think this is the perfect time for Esteban Ocon to really, lead MoneyGram Haas F1 into a much higher stratosphere, and that's why I've got him at number 5. My number 4 is Mercedes. I think, and like I said, with this top 5, it's going to be totally different because I think all 5 of these teams are going to be really, really close on points. Haas, maybe not so much, but I think Haas is going to be that Aston Martin of last year where they're just going to have so many points, but not enough that they're fighting for a 4th place finish. They're going to have enough to finish in 5th and be way ahead of anybody that's below them. But I think Mercedes is going to be a number 4 team. I see them getting race victories this season, obviously with George Russell. I don't know so much about Kimi, and I don't know if he's going to be able to wrap his head around those upgrades at Mercedes. And so I really wonder, how much Kimi is really going to be able to put forward for a Mercedes team that wants to be back up towards the top fighting for Constructors' Championship. Moving on to number 3, I've got Red Bull. Like I said, Liam Lawson is being put in a car and in a no-win situation where they're building this car around Max Verstappen and what exactly Max Verstappen wants. So like I said, I've talked about it. Liam Lawson's going to have a really hard time, I think, wrapping his head around that. Whereas Max Verstappen is going to be a top 3 in the driver's standings this season. But with him being a top 3 in the driver's standings this year, and, with the likes of Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris all fighting for those top positions as well, I think Red Bull is going to have a really hard time, finishing any higher than 3rd. Then moving on to my top 2 teams, I've got Ferrari at number 2, which means McLaren at number 1. But Ferrari at number 2, like I said, this season is so close and is, built to be so close within the F1 standings, not only within the drivers but the constructors as well. And Ferrari showed great signs towards the end of last season that they really got their heads around the upgrades that they were bringing to their car, and they weren't just bringing upgrades that, just for upgrade's sake, they were bringing upgrades that really did improve the car and improve the driver's chances of, winning races. We saw them win in Austin. We've seen them win multiple races last season. Charles Leclerc, a multiple race winner, and you bringing in a seven and, you can put in quotation marks, 8-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. I think this team is going to be literally within points of McLaren, and it's McLaren. You've got Lando Norris, who, like I said, I think is going to. We're going to see a different side of Lando Norris this season that we didn't see last season. He's going to get his elbows out a lot more, and I think Oscar Piastri knows his place right now until either Lando Norris moves teams or he moves to a team that wants him as their number one driver. We're going to see Oscar to kind of take a second driver seat behind Lando Norris, and he's really going to have to be a team player this year in being able to, get the team in a position to win the Constructors' Championships, which I think Oscar will do quite well. But like I said, I think McLaren is going to win the Constructors' Championship, and they're going to win the Drivers' Championship with Lando Norris. So now on to my 3 bold predictions for the 2025 season. My first prediction. Now remember, when I was talking about the driver standings, I had Jack Doohan at number 20. And this is the reason I have Jack Doohan at number 20. I hate it for him, and I hate it, just for the sport of F1 in general. But I think Jack Doohan loses his seat within the first 6 races of the Formula One season, and Franco Colapinto takes over as the second driver at Alpine. Now, I hate it for Jack because he does not deserve it. I think he's been a very quality driver for Alpine as being a reserve driver for him, and he's done the job well for him. But I think he's been put in an untenable position to where literally they bring in Franco Colapinto in the offseason to be the reserve driver, but literally everybody knew that that's not what they were bringing Franco in for. Like, it's literally everybody else at Alpine knows it except for Jack Doohan that Franco's coming in to be the second driver at some point this season, whether it's 6 races in or it's 2 races in. The writing is on the wall at Alpine, and Jack Doohan, I feel really horrible for, and he's gonna lose his seat in 2025. But then my second prediction of the season, and this one's going to be bold, and this one I'm considering my homer pick of the season. Haas Formula One will score more than 1 podium this season in 2025. Now, I don't know whether that's somehow a race victory in there somewhere, a shock third place. With all these teams being so close, you may get some, wrecks that take out a lot of people. But I think they're going to have a couple really good shots, to score some podiums in there where we may not necessarily expect them to win it. And that's why I say I just got this feeling in it. And it may just be indigestion, but I'm saying it right now. I think Haas is going to be a team that is really going to be reckoned with for this 2025 season. And finally, my last bold prediction of this season is we are going to have this season, 2025, look almost mirror to the 2012 season. And what I mean by that, in the 2012 season, we had 7 different race winners in the first 7 races, and it was one of the closest championships that we'd had in quite some time. And I feel like when you're looking down that grid at the top 10, Lando Norris, I think, is a race winner. Lewis Hamilton, a race winner. Max Verstappen, a race winner. Oscar Piastri wins a race. Charles Leclerc wins a race. George Russell wins a race. Then we have to sit here and think, well, who could be that 7th driver that would be different from those other 6? You've got Liam Lawson. It could get a shock victory for a Red Bull. You could get Ollie Bierman in a Haas. I'm not going to hold my breath, but either Ollie Bierman or Esteban Ocon, who is a proven race winner in Formula One, maybe we get a Kimi Antonelli. Maybe he picks up on the Mercedes a lot faster than we all expected, and he pushes for more and more race victories. So I think we're going to have 7 different drivers win in the first 7 races, just like we did in 2012, to where this season is so darn close in the championship standings that we're going to have at least 5, maybe 6 drivers still in with a shout, with 6 to 7 races to go. But guys, let me know what your predictions are for the 2025 Formula One season. Who do you think's going to win the Drivers' Championship? Who do you think's going to win the Constructors? What are some of your bold predictions for 2025? Let me know that in the comment section down below, guys. Slap a like on this video. It helps get this video out to more and more Formula One fans. And then, guys, if you are new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers. So please hit that subscribe button if you guys can. It helps me out immensely. But, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. And, guys, the American F1 fan, I'm Eric Ringel.